What if I told you that one of America's most successful, inexpensive automobiles didn't have a gearbox, a driveshaft, or even a reverse gear? In fact, if you wanted to back up, you had to climb out and push it by hand. At first glance, it looked more like a child's toy than a real automobile, a lightweight wooden platform with bicycle wheels and two simple seats. Yet this strange little machine became one of the most recognizable budget vehicles of the 1910s and 1920s, introducing thousands of Americans to motorized transportation. Its story didn't begin with the famous Red Bug name, however. It began years earlier with a remarkably simple invention called the Smith Flyer, evolved into the Briggs and Stratton Flyer, and eventually became the Auto Red Bug, even spawning an electric version decades before electric cars became fashionable. Together, these tiny machines proved that sometimes the biggest engineering breakthrough isn't making something more complicated. It's making it unbelievably simple. The story started in 1915 when the A.O. Smith Company, already well known for manufacturing steel products and automobile frames, introduced an ultra-light vehicle called the Smith Flyer. Unlike conventional automobiles of the era, the Flyer wasn't designed to compete with the Ford Model T. Instead, it targeted people who simply couldn't afford a full-sized automobile. The engineers asked themselves a radical question. What was the absolute minimum needed to create practical motorized transportation? Their answer eliminated nearly everything considered standard on an automobile. The lightweight chassis consisted primarily of ash wood, reinforced with steel brackets, carrying two passengers on simple bench seats above four narrow wire-spoke wheels. It looked closer to a horse cart than an automobile, but every missing component helped reduce both weight and manufacturing cost. Simplicity wasn't a compromise. It was the entire philosophy behind the vehicle. The Flyer became famous because of one extraordinary mechanical invention known as the motor wheel. Instead of transmitting power through a clutch, gearbox, driveshaft, and differential, the entire engine sat directly above a separate fifth wheel mounted behind the passenger compartment. The small single-cylinder, four-cycle gasoline engine, producing roughly 2 horsepower, spun this additional wheel, which pressed against the road using its own weight. Lower the engine assembly with a hand lever, and the wheel gripped the ground, pushing the vehicle forward. Raise the lever, and the wheel lifted clear of the pavement, allowing the Flyer to coast freely. The design eliminated dozens of mechanical parts found in ordinary automobiles. There was no transmission to shift, no differential to service, and almost nothing to brake. It was one of the simplest drive systems ever installed in a production motor vehicle, and surprisingly, it actually worked. In 1919, engine manufacturer Briggs and Stratton saw potential where others saw little more than a curiosity. The company purchased the rights to the Smith Flyer and began refining the design rather than replacing it. Their engineers strengthened the frame, improved overall build quality, and most importantly, installed Briggs and Stratton's own dependable gasoline engine. Although still producing about 2 horsepower, the updated power unit offered improved reliability, easier starting, and lower maintenance. The vehicle became known as the Briggs and Stratton Flyer, and while its appearance changed very little, owners quickly noticed that it felt more polished than the original. Measuring just over 8 feet long and weighing roughly 300 pounds, it remained one of the lightest automobiles sold in America. Top speed reached approximately 25 miles per hour, while fuel economy approached an incredible 80 miles per gallon, numbers that remained impressive even by much later standards. By the early 1920s, the Flyer had become more than an engineering experiment. It was becoming a lifestyle vehicle. Unlike conventional automobiles, it was so light that 2 adults could lift one end off the ground if necessary. Owners loved its mechanical simplicity because almost every repair could be performed with a handful of basic tools. There was one catch, however. Since the vehicle had no reverse gear, drivers had to climb out and push it backward whenever they parked incorrectly. Starting the engine also required a different routine. Once the small single-cylinder engine was running, the driver simply lowered the motor wheel until it contacted the pavement and the Flyer began moving forward. Lift the wheel and the drive instantly disengaged. The entire system looked almost primitive, yet it proved remarkably dependable. Its simplicity also made production inexpensive, allowing thousands of Americans to experience motorized transportation for a fraction of the cost of a conventional automobile. In 1924, another chapter began when the rights changed hands once again. Production continued under a new company, Automotive Electric Service Corporation, and the vehicle received a new identity, the Auto Red Bug. Mechanically, it remained closely related to the Briggs and Stratton Flyer, preserving the famous motor wheel concept that had defined the design from the very beginning. However, the company gave the little vehicle a friendlier image. Brighter paint, improved seating, cleaner body details, and fresh marketing transformed it from a bare-bones economy machine into a fun recreational vehicle. Instead of advertising it purely as inexpensive transportation, the Red Bug was promoted as an enjoyable companion for vacations, resorts, campgrounds, and weekend adventures. It even appeared in the catalogs of Abercrombie & Fitch, then an upscale sporting goods retailer, rather than a fashion brand, and the famous toy store F.A.O. Schwartz, something almost unheard of for an automobile. The Red Bug was becoming less of a necessity and more of a symbol of affordable leisure. The story became even more unusual when Automotive Electric Service introduced an electric version of the Red Bug. Decades before modern electric cars entered public discussion, the company experimented with replacing the gasoline-powered motor wheel with an electric drive system powered by onboard batteries. Without the large engine assembly hanging behind the passengers, the electric Red Bug looked noticeably different from its gasoline counterpart, leading many people today to believe they are completely different vehicles. In reality, they shared the same basic chassis and philosophy while using different methods of propulsion. Although the electric model never achieved widespread commercial success, it demonstrated that lightweight vehicles required far less energy than conventional automobiles. More than a century later, modern urban electric microcars follow remarkably similar thinking. Reduce weight, simplify construction, and maximize efficiency rather than relying on ever larger power plants. The Red Bug had quietly anticipated that philosophy generations earlier. Looking back today, the Smith Flyer, Briggs and Stratton Flyer, and Auto Red Bug represent far more than three unusual little vehicles. Together, they tell the story of an idea that refused to disappear. From the original Smith Flyer that introduced the ingenious motor wheel, to Briggs and Stratton's refined production version, and finally to the Auto Red Bug with both gasoline and electric variants, the concept evolved while remaining astonishingly faithful to its original simplicity. Few automobiles have ever eliminated so many mechanical components and still managed to transport people reliably. They proved that innovation isn't always about adding complexity. Sometimes it's about asking which parts can disappear altogether. Although these tiny machines have long since vanished from everyday roads, they remain among the most creative examples of minimalist engineering ever placed into production. And if you enjoy discovering forgotten automotive inventions, brilliant engineering shortcuts, and the incredible stories behind history's strangest vehicles, be sure to subscribe to On Wheels. Sometimes the smallest automobiles leave behind the biggest ideas.